Stories about strength usually praise the people who can carry more, endure more, and keep giving long after everyone else has stopped. But there is a quieter story that almost nobody tells. The hidden cost of caring too much is that it slowly turns your heart into a place of constant motion. You notice everything, you absorb everything, you feel things other people walk past without even seeing. At first, this seems like a gift. It makes you compassionate, attentive, and deeply human. It allows you to sense pain before it becomes visible. It lets you become the person others depend on when their own lives start breaking apart. But over time, caring stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like a reflex. You are no longer simply loving people, you are scanning them, monitoring them, carrying their moods, and trying to prevent outcomes that were never fully in your control to begin with. That is when care becomes expensive, not financially, psychologically, because the mind was never built to hold the weight of everything and everyone all at once. And the more deeply a person cares, the easier it becomes for that care to turn into vigilance, guilt, and exhaustion. What began as empathy starts to resemble responsibility for outcomes that were never yours to own, and that is where the real damage begins. A person who cares too much often does not notice the shift right away. They think they're simply being loyal, generous, or emotionally available. They answer every message, over-explain every silence, and replay every interaction in their mind as if the right amount of analysis could stop pain from happening. They become experts at reading tension, but terrible at resting. They learn how to anticipate disappointment before it arrives, because disappointment hurts less when it has already been mentally rehearsed. This is one of the most common psychological traps of deep caring. The nervous system begins to believe that love means prevention, that if you care enough, watch enough, fix enough, or sacrifice enough, then pain can be managed. They disappoint us not always because they are cruel, but because they are limited. And the person who cares too much rarely knows how to accept that limitation without turning it inward. They assume that if something fell apart, they must have missed a warning sign. If someone drifted away, they must not have given enough. If someone is unhappy, they must somehow be responsible for making it right. This is how care quietly mutates into self-blame. The emotional burden grows heavier, not because the world becomes more difficult, but because the person has started assigning themselves a role no human being can perform. They become the keeper of everyone's comfort, the translator of everyone's pain, and the silent witness to everything that might go wrong. Eventually, even good intentions begin to hurt. The heart does not stop caring, it simply stops knowing where the boundary is. This is why people who care too much often look calm on the outside while slowly collapsing on the inside. They are usually the ones who seem strong, dependable, and emotionally intelligent. They are the ones friends call first, the ones who listen without interrupting, the ones who notice when something is off before anyone else does. But that same sensitivity can become a prison, because when you feel too much, you do not just understand suffering, you absorb it. The pain of other people begins to feel like unfinished business inside your own mind. You think about their struggles after the conversation ends. You carry their frustration home with you. You keep trying to fix situations that were never handed to you in the first place. And slowly, the line between compassion and over-identification starts to disappear. Psychologically, this happens because the brain begins linking safety with usefulness. If I am needed, I matter. If I can help, I am safe. If I stay alert, I can prevent loss. Over time, that pattern becomes hard to break. The person starts confusing being indispensable with being loved. They think if they stop trying, everything will fall apart. So they keep giving, they keep checking, they keep showing up even when their own energy is gone. But constant giving has a cost. It creates a hidden resentment because every sacrifice that goes unnoticed eventually begins to feel like betrayal. That resentment is often the first sign that care has crossed into self-abandonment. The tragedy is that people who care too much usually do not see themselves as victims. They see themselves as responsible adults. They tell themselves that this is just what love looks like. Yet beneath that story, something more fragile is often happening. They are afraid that if they are not useful, they will not be wanted. Afraid that if they stop managing everyone's emotions, they will be forgotten. Afraid that if they set boundaries, they will become selfish. So they remain available, even when availability is slowly draining the life out of them. And because they are so focused on everyone else's pain, they miss the quieter form of pain developing in their own body. Tension, insomnia, emotional numbness, and a strange sense that life is becoming narrower despite all the effort they pour into it. The most difficult part is that caring too much does not only hurt the person who feels it, it also changes what they accept from others. People who are deeply caring often become easy to exploit because they are skilled at understanding need and weak at defending themselves against it. They tolerate inconsistency longer than they should. They forgive too quickly. They explain away neglect. They mistake intensity for intimacy and suffering for depth. This is why caring too much can create a painful loop. The more someone gives, the more they attract people who are happy to receive without matching the effort. The more they try to keep things together, the more they end up in relationships where they are the only one holding the weight. And every time they stay, they teach themselves that their discomfort is a small price to pay for connection. But that is not connection. That is emotional overextension. It is a slow agreement to live in a state where your needs are always secondary. Some people call this love because it feels noble. Some call it loyalty because it sounds honorable. But in its darkest form, it becomes a kind of self-erasure. The person gets so used to reading everyone else's wounds that they no longer know how to ask what is happening inside them. They become fluent in other people's pain and illiterate in their own. And then one day, usually after a betrayal, a loss, or a long period of silent exhaustion, they realize they are not just tired, they are emptied out. Not because they loved too deeply, but because they gave without limit in a world that never promised to return the same level of care. That is the hidden cost. Caring too much can make you kinder, but it can also make you easier to break. It can make you wiser, but also more vulnerable to disappointment. It can make you deeply human, yet painfully exposed to the fact that not everything you nurture will survive. And perhaps that is the cruelest lesson of all. Caring is not the problem. Unbounded caring is. When love has no limit, it stops protecting you and starts consuming you. The real challenge is not learning how to care less. It is learning how to care without disappearing. Sometimes the most dangerous thing about caring too much is that it makes neglect feel normal. You stop recognizing what drains you because your attention is always pointed outward. You become so busy holding other people together that you never notice how loosely you are holding yourself. And by the time you finally feel the damage, it no longer looks dramatic. It looks like exhaustion, silence, and the quiet loss of parts of yourself you never meant to give away. The hardest part is that caring too much rarely feels like a mistake while you are living it. It feels noble. It feels mature. It feels like proof that your heart is bigger than your fear. But slowly, the same thing that once made you valuable begins to make you invisible. You are still there, still giving, still understanding, while something inside you quietly learns that being needed is not the same as being cared for.